fun. You want to come up here, Joanna? All right. So today, the lesson is entitled Dodging the Darts. And it was a struggle, to nail down the lesson. Had all these ideas floating all week and praying about them, and finally God settled it in my heart. So we're going to go to Ephesians 6:16. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 16.
Actually a pretty good lesson because I think a lot of this is going on right now.
Yeah, and I always feel like when I end up wrestling with it, it usually ends up being for me. So maybe I need this right now. But Ephesians 6, verse 16 says, above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. So in ancient warfare, obviously things, with technology and stuff, things are much different now than they were in ancient warfare. Ancient everything to me is like, whoa. But warfare was really brutal. But they, and a dart in warfare, a dart could come out of nowhere and pierce the person. And, he had to have his shield up to protect him. And I read that they had two shields. They would have the arm shield, and that one was a smaller one, or they'd also have the body shield, and it would cover their entire body and even have a place for their eyes. But running from the darts wasn't going to work. First of all, you're not sure where the dart was coming from. You couldn't see it, so you could run and still get hit. So that was not the key to dodging the darts. Actually, the key to dodging the darts in that ancient warfare was to stand with your shield in place. Okay, and they made these shields. They were made out of wood most of the time, but then they would have layers. And one layer that most all of them had was the leather layer. And that was so that when an incoming arrow would hit up, a lot of times they were lighting those arrows up. They were setting them on fire. And if that leather was not on the shield, then that shield's made of wood. So it's going to do what? It's going to burn up. And it would catch. And so that was their way of protecting themselves and keeping that, quenching, so to speak, quenching that incoming fire, was to have that leather protection on there. But so without the leather, the arrows would have burned it up, but the leather coating, the fire of the arrow was quenched. And additionally, they would also take the darts and dip them in a deadly poison that would just, go into the person and just burn them from within. So, yeah, it was brutal. Any which way you look at it, the shield was absolutely vital. If somebody went out in warfare without the shield, they could count on it. At some point, you're going to get hit. First of all, you couldn't see those incoming targets. Second of all, if the enemy saw you without a shield, who do you think they're going to aim for? Yeah, you were an easy target. So Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12 says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And as Christians, we are in warfare. And I do think it's important to bring this to our attention, because we speak about it and this is spiritual warfare, but we really do not have any kind of grasp on what spiritual warfare really is and how much spiritual warfare is going on. If we could put on God's glasses and look around and see, just the demonic activity that is out in the world. Okay, you go to Walmart, full of demons. Joking but not joking. Everywhere that Satan can, he has his workers at work, and we can't see all that. And there's with good reason. But God can see all that. And we can be aware of it, though. And by being aware of it, we can have our shield up. So, you know, we do often forget this, that we are in warfare, and in order to dodge those fiery darts of the wicked one, we need to have our armor on and our shield in place. Verse 13 says, "Wherefore, take unto you the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all to stand." And we've done a lesson on the armor of God, and I'll probably go over that again in the future. But today we are talking about the shield of faith. Our shield of faith is our faith and trust in God's protection of us. When the battle rages around us, we have to have confidence in God's care of us. You know why? Because if we do have confidence in God's care for us, it'll make us react differently than if we don't have that confidence. You know, an example, when my husband and I are going through a rough time, I can have confidence in his spiritual leading and guidance. Even though I'm unsure about things, I have confidence in my husband. You know why? Because I've seen the Lord work through him over and over and over again, and I've seen him guide me in the right way. On a much larger level, it is even more so with God. God has gotten us through so many tough times. If we look back in our life, you know, and those are the things, remember we talked about muscles or yums. You got to watch that. Do you remember muscles or yums? It was Calvin. And I gave the example last week. Calvin used to come in, and he was always doing this, and I'd say, "Are those muscles or yums?" And he'd say, "Muscles." And I'd say, "I think they're yums." So we did a lesson last week on faith, and that, you know, it is very important for us to have this confidence in God and to understand God is going to protect us. And, you know, people like to say, "God's got my back." Be very careful with slang when it comes to the Lord. I saw something, I was horrified into Goodwill, and I was flipping in t-shirts. No, I was on Etsy. That's what I was. I was on Etsy looking, and it said, "God is dope."
What?
You know, you really think that's a compliment to God? No, actually what it is disrespectful, a holy and righteous God. But sadly, people think, you know, that they're being cool with God. No. We need to be so careful about that respect factor and understand. And that's a problem of society, is we've totally lost the respect and reverence for who God is. But God is taking care of us. You know, no matter what Brother Devin and Sam in their life, how old they get, I am always watching out. I don't care how old they get, you know. I try not to interfere, but I'm always in the background praying, and I'm always here if they need me, and I'll make sure that they know that without trying, you know, being careful of not overstepping bounds. If you're a mother-in-law, be very careful of that. Or no, if you're a mother and mother-in-law. And I'm hugely blessed. Let me just say, I am hugely blessed, like beyond measure with Kristen. She's the most gracious, wonderful daughter-in-law ever. But I still try to be careful with that. Anyway, so we must put our trust in God to put out those fiery darts of the enemy that are intending to maim and kill us. You know, what is Satan's purpose in those fiery darts, the fiery darts of the wicked? To maim us, to kill us.
That we can't do this.
Yep. Yep. And to make us doubt. Yep. And we're going to go over some examples of fiery darts that are intended for our heart and how to dodge them. I say it all the time, this is just a starting point. There's so many. My husband, I was on the computer, and he's like, "Julie, how long are you going to make that?" He's like, "You have a problem getting through one page." And I said, "I know." And at that point, I had been like trying to decide whether to add one more point. And I'm like, okay, I'll stop here. Because it could go on and on and on. Because basically what it has to do is it promises that God makes us. You know, so, and the Bible is full of promises that we do not even give the time of day to. How sad is that? God's like, man, I've given you a whole book full of promises, full of direction, and we just go about our own way and do our own thing and then cry to him when life, you know, is not going the way we think it should. So here are some fiery darts intended for our hearts, and here's how to dodge them as well. One fiery dart that I often hear about is an ungodly work or home environment. And at first I had, you know, ungodly work, an ungodly work environment as the fiery dart. But then I thought, you know what? Sometimes it's an ungodly home too. A Christian, since we're all ladies, you know, I'm talking to ladies, a Christian lady who's living in an ungodly home because her husband's not saved and doesn't, like in growing up, my dad's not saved, but my dad didn't drink, my dad didn't smoke, you know, my dad did not do most of the things that the lost world was doing. So that was a little bit different for me, but there are so many wives who they go home from church and they have a husband who ridicules them or who blasphemes God, that kind of thing, and they have had to learn to deal with that ungodly environment while still being godly themselves. And it is possible because of who God is. So that is the fiery dart that we're talking about. But with my shield of faith in place, God says, fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against workers of iniquity. Verse 2, for they shall soon be cut down like the grass and wither as the green herb. And for time's sake, I just read that one off the paper, but that's Psalm 37, 1-2. Fret not thyself because of evildoers. Do you go to a workplace or do you go home and there's evil? And I don't mean this unkind about a husband, a spouse, or a family member. When I say evildoers, I'm not trying to be unkind, but that is the reality of it. Somebody who does not love God and they're, you know, and maybe they make fun of you or they try to get you not to go to church or they schedule things on church days. You know, those are all areas where we would need to be aware of these fiery darts, you know. Anyone ever play darts? Yeah?
Yeah.
You any
I'm
good?
good at it.
You any good, Joanna? No?
Probably
feel
end up
like-
playing myself before I pin the target.
Quick side note, Devin you had, we didn't know he was doing it. That house that had the house fire and they redid it all. Well, we saw all these knife marks. Devin had a throwing knife in there as a teenager.
Oh boy.
You know, because pastors always let him have knives and that kind of stuff. And he had been throwing them at the wall. I'm like, oh my.
Oh, Devin.
Anyway, so these fiery darts. But this is a fiery dart that's quenched because God says, fret not thyself because of evildoers. You know, and when it comes to the workplace, fret not thyself because of evildoers. And I work from home, so I'm not exposed to the same things that, say, Jen is and Joanna is. And I'm not sure, Peggy, what your work environment is, and then Tanya, I'm sure you run into some as well, where people are they're ungodly. They don't love God. And so they say things, you know, and we make jokes about, oh, my burning ears. Yeah, because when we hear, oh my God, that should grieve us. That should grieve us. Just like when I read that and it said God is dope. That wounded my spirit. That grieved my spirit. And so I'm saying, oh, you make such a big deal. Yeah, because we're talking about God. And we're talking about the one who saved me and the one who loves me and the one who cares for me and the one who's provided a home in heaven. It'd be like if you said something disrespectful about my mom or dad.
Oh boy.
On a much different, on a much bigger level. Okay. What did you need?
I was gonna just say I had an individual at work who was kind of a little bit mocking me a little bit, and another coworker says, "Are you gonna say something back to them?" Yeah, but I'm not going to say the way she wants me to say it.
Mhm.
Because if I react the way she want to react, that's a bad reflection.
Mhm.
One, on my testimony, and then two, even any ounce of winning her over for the Lord.
Yep.
And also, I also want to praise. I just want to praise the Lord because she's actually stopped. She's kind of just let off her language and
Yep.
things like that. So it does
You know,
turn.
and yeah, in the workplace, when you put God first and you pray and say, okay, God, help me to handle myself in a way that does this. Okay? And it's hard because, you know, if you're like me and you got some sass in you and that old person comes up and you're like, well, I'm going to give you an earful.
Yeah.
That is not the right answer. It is not. But it's also not the right answer to never stand up and say something for the cause of Christ. You know, they can talk about stuff, okay, that I would find offensive. So I don't buy that you can't talk about God in the workplace. Okay? Well, then don't talk about, you know, what you did all over the weekend either, because it's the same thing, you know. Or try to bring it about like, you know, oh, you went and had a family reunion this weekend. I got to go to church, and then just start telling them about it.
Yeah.
You know, we can be very.
The Lord gives you opportunity.
Yes, we can be very aware of opportunities that the Lord presents, but we have to be aware of them, and we have to be on the lookout for them, and we have to pray. So if you're one that has to work out in the workforce, now I have to pray about dealing with people on the phones, because sometimes I'm like, oh my Lord, help me, you know, like. I don't know, some of these people that call in, you know, and then they want to tell me how much they love Mike and all that. I'm like, so I have to do an extended well, but it's not the same as going to a workplace and having to deal with everybody there. If that's you, then understand that God says, fret not thyself because of evildoers. Or if you're the Christian woman that has to go home or be around family members that don't love God, fret not thyself because of evildoers. God, just quench that fiery dart, put that fire out. Because if God's telling you not to fret, don't worry about it. Why? Because He's quenching that fire. He's taking care of that for you. You know, make sure your shield's in place. Make sure you're trusting God when you go into that workplace. Okay, God, you know I need you. I cannot do this on my own. You know, when you're going home to that unsaved loved one or that unsaved family member, let God quench that dart. But you've got to say, you got to put your shield up and say, okay, God, I can't do this. You know, that is so important that we recognize we can't, but He can. Okay? And turn it over to Him and let Him quench that fiery dart. And in so doing, we dodge the bullet, we dodge the arrow, so to speak, dodge the dart. The next fiery dart is one that is of feelings of loneliness, weakness, fear, or distress. I feel like this is one that Satan and his minions just sit there and throw at Christians. Loneliness, you can be around people and still be very, very lonely. And you know, but with my shield of faith in place, God says, let's go to Isaiah 41:10. Let's turn there. Isaiah 41:10. Talking about dodging the darts. And with my shield in place, God says this, Psalm 41:10. Fear thou not. I mean, this is really, let this speak to your heart. Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee. Yea, I will help thee. Yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. Is there more comfort available than that right there? God just, you know, I'm such a visual person. I can just kind of picture fingers being wet, you know, like this, and that fiery dart coming in, and God doing that, you know, and just putting it out like, you know, and I dodge the dart, so to speak, because God quenches it. God puts it out for me. He says, fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be thou not dismayed. when you're feeling lonely, when you're feeling distressed, when you're feeling fear. You know, and someone say, well, I don't feel fear. Well, if you ever feel apprehensive about something, that's the little bit of fear right there. You know, or you're wondering how things are going to work out, or you feel lonely, like no one cares. God says, fear thou not, for I am with thee. You know, just to know that God is always with me, for I am thy God. You know, he's not just Teresa's God. He's not just Tanya's God or Pastor's God. He's my God. You know, but how often do I even say that? How often do I even refer to him as my God? Make it personal. He's my God. He's not just God, which that in itself is amazing, but he's my God. There's so much comfort in that, and you know that fiery dart of feelings of loneliness, weakness, fear, or distress, God's just like quenching that, and I dodged the dart. The next fiery dart we're going to talk about is thoughts that do not please the Lord. This, I mean, one little sentence encompasses so much. Thoughts that do not please the Lord. These can be, I mean, of course, we always automatically go to wicked thoughts, don't we? You know, we think that's what that's talking about, thoughts that do not please the Lord. But do you know thoughts that belittle me are thoughts that don't please the Lord? Thoughts of low self-worth are thoughts that don't please the Lord. You know why? Because, okay, so, you know, I'm not saying go to the other extreme, be prideful. No, that's not what I'm talking about. But too many Christians, they think so little, Christian ladies, they think so little of themselves. They have such low self-esteem. They don't think they have any value, any importance. We're children of the King. And those thoughts do not please the Lord. Those are fiery darts from Satan that he will fire our way and say, you're nothing. Who do you think you are? You really think God loves you after everything you've done and you still continue to do? Choo, choo, choo. And you know what? And the Christian lady gets wounded and falls out of church, falls out of her fellowship with God. And so we have to be very aware of that. Let's go to 2 Corinthians 10:5. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5. What are some other thoughts that wouldn't please the Lord?
I would say it's not thinking that he's able to care for our basic needs like food, or be able to say a family member you're like, oh, they're never going to get saved. I would think that would be unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyone else? Anything to add?
Thoughts that you're not good enough,
Mm-hmm.
don't do things good enough.
Yep. Yep. Those are not thoughts from God. You know, those are fiery darts. And remember, some of the battle is just a big portion of the battle is recognizing the darts. You know, seeing them, but putting that faith and trust, because there's nothing we can do about it. We need God to quench those. That's how we dodge the darts. Is, you know, having that faith and trust. Okay, God, I know you're going to take care of me. I know that, you know, no matter what darts Satan throws my way, that you're going to take care of me. And then, you know, so those darts won't penetrate. When Satan sends that thought your way, it's deflected. It's quenched. You dodge it. And you may go in your mind, but it's out just as quickly. Have you ever had that happen? You probably don't, at the time, you don't spend time thinking about it, but that is the Lord taking care of that stuff for you. That is him quenching those thoughts. You don't dwell on it. I've told you before, sometimes I refer to myself as a shallow thinker, but just because by that I mean I do not spend a lot of time thinking about one thing. I don't know how people do, but people are wired that way. My sister and my husband are wired that way, my sister Michelle. So they spend a lot of time thinking about, certain thing. Man, I'm doing good just to get through the day, I don't have time to, but we have to be very careful about our thought life and what we're spending time thinking on. Maybe it's not even bad thoughts, but maybe because they're not on the Lord, then they're not pleasing to the Lord, because we spend too much time thinking about something else besides Him. And He wants our thoughts to be on Him. That's what pleases Him. 2 Corinthians 10:5 says, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. Okay, so Philippians 4:8. Turn there real quick. Philippians 4:8. Now I'm going to tell you what you do think on.
Oh, I remember this.
Casting down imaginations that we just read, that is God going, shh, putting that out. But He also tells us in Philippians 4:8 what we are supposed to think on. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. Why do you think back here in 2 Corinthians 10:5, God told us, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ? What's the obedience of Christ? It's in Philippians 4:8. Think on these things, the things that are true, honest, just, pure, lovely, good report. God tells us this because He knows our sinful mind is going to have thoughts that we shouldn't. And let me just say, if you fill your mind with garbage, then that's going to produce thoughts that are garbage. Okay? A big one is horror movies. That's a big one. Horror books. Okay? I had, in my early years, I think it might have been, I thought I was saved, but I wasn't. I just wasn't. And I was reading a Frank Peretti, and it deals in, he's a Christian author, but it deals in the spiritual realm. Okay? When you dabble in that stuff, you are opening a gateway to Satan. Okay? Whether somebody labels it Christian, fiction, anyway, you're talking about the spiritual world, and it's nothing to fool with, and it's nothing that we should be dealing with. The only thing we should be doing is in Jesus' name. But you should not open up the door to Satan by bringing that stuff into your home or reading it. And it does, and it produces thoughts, casting down imaginations. If we're casting down imaginations of wicked things, if that's what that verse is talking about, and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ, okay? You will not be able to do that if you're filling your mind with garbage. Okay, you won't be able to cast down imaginations. And yeah, it reminds me of children that get scared. They watch Devin, he used to watch Little House on the Prairie, and there was one episode that they had, and at the time I didn't think of it, but this is how impressionable kids are. It was a Halloween episode, okay, with the pumpkin and all that. And I remember Devin at like 5 years old running out of the room, but it was scary to him. And we think nothing of feeding our kids these things, but it is scary to them. And they're too little to cast down imaginations, so then they have nightmares at night. I remember him watching Jungle Book, the cartoon. The kid had nightmares of Kaa, the snake. Okay? And we can say, oh my goodness, really? Yes, really. But when we feed our minds that stuff, then these are the kind of thoughts they produce. And we don't understand. With a kid, it's easy to see how it manifests, nightmares at night. Okay? We don't see what it's doing to us when we fill our mind with that stuff. Not necessarily but other stuff. But just be aware that, that fiery dart, Satan wants us thinking on things that don't please the Lord. He's just shooting those right at. So if he can fill your mind with stuff that's going to cause you to think that stuff, same thing with books, magazines. If magazines or TV shows cause you to want things, okay, that's what commercials are designed to do. Those thoughts do not please the Lord, okay, because the Bible says we're supposed to be content with what we have, okay. So if reading a magazine that has all these ads or these things about women that have this or has pictures of the high-end kitchen, which I love, so if those put those thoughts in your mind, this is the kind of stuff that we have to be aware of. And we say, oh, that's not a big deal. It is a big deal. Everything we put in our eye gate and our ear gate is a big deal. Why? Because it's producing thoughts. Okay? And if we want our thoughts to please the Lord and we want to dodge that dart of those thoughts that don't please the Lord, then we have to make sure we're filling our mind with good things. And what are good? I told you I'm trying to read more. I put that on the ladies' thread. It's not easy for me. I wish it was like, oh, I just read, 10 books a month, spiritual good books, alongside of my Bible. But I don't. I'm doing good to get through one book, and I always make sure I'm not reading that book more than this book, okay? Because that one is written by a man. This is written by God, who knows me inside and out. And, so that's the first one. All right, so the fiery dart, the thoughts that do not please the Lord, and with my shield and faith, God says, casting down those imaginations. So that is a fiery dart that's quenched. The next fiery dart that Satan throws at us is one of pride, okay? And pride comes in all kinds of different forms. One form that I'd like to let you know is be careful of how important stuff is to you. How important having the designer handbag on your shoulder is. I told you once I got a Coach, I got it at the Goodwill. My husband bought it, but it was like $30 in mint condition. But I stopped carrying it around when I noticed I was on purpose turning. I would have the coat slung, or the bag slung over, and I noticed the emblem wasn't out. And I changed it around, and the Lord smote my heart. And so I put it away. Haven't used it since. And it may seem silly to you, but I don't want to get caught up in that. I do not want that stuff to be in part. That's pride. Look at me. And that is not what we're about as Christian ladies. We're about look at him. Okay? So that is definitely one that I feel Satan uses. And we just need to be careful. It's not bad to have a Coach bag. I don't want you to think that, or whatever designer purse. But be very careful. First of all, is it so that people look at you? Really, I don't know, you deal with that one, let the Lord deal with that one. But you just have to go back and say, okay, Lord, show me my motives in this. I'm almost done. Show me my motives in wanting this item. It's not necessarily that it's wrong to have, but if your motive in having it is wrong, then it's not going to please the Lord. So let him tell you. Pray about everything. Pray about the small things. Pray about the big things. Pray about it all. God does not hide things from us. So that is the fiery dart of pride is one that Satan uses a lot. We were at one church, so I used to go to a conference at a church, and every year I was under the stress to come up with 5 great outfits. That is pride. But it was the atmosphere that fed that. And this is Christian ladies, and that is not how we're supposed to be. And it took me a while for it to dawn on me, like, the clothes that I have are already nice. I was trying to live up to their standard. That is not what God would have for me. And so that is pride. And these are the things that we need to be aware of, so that I could say, once I let God speak to my heart and show me, okay, then I could say, okay, Lord, I'm sorry. What I have is perfectly fine, and I'm not going to worry about that. If it's modest, my husband likes it, it's pleasing. I do not need 5 new outfits to feed vanity and pride. Okay, so let's go to James 4:6 real quick. James 4:6. I really do feel like with Christian ladies, Satan really uses the fiery dart of pride a lot with us. James 4:6. Who has that one?
I do.
Okay, go ahead and read that.
But he giveth more grace, wherefore he saith, God resisteth the pride, but giveth grace unto the humble.
Okay, so the fiery dart that Satan's using is pride, but God says, that he gives grace to the humble. So be humble. Psst. And the fiery dart is quenched, and I've dodged that dart by being humble. That's what that means. Don't let Satan get you with the fiery dart. Okay? The last fiery dart we're going to talk about is giving into temptations. This is one where Satan's going, and it's all day long. Temptations just keep sprouting up. Things you used to do, things you used to watch, things I used to think about. Those are all temptations to go back to what I used to be. Well, I'm not the same person I used to be. A new creature is not doing the same thing that the old creature was doing, where there's true salvation, there's true change. So, but it's not to say we're not going to be tempted. We will be tempted. But we have to be aware of those darts, and we have to put our shield in place and say, okay, God, I know that you are going to take care of the temptation for me. And he really will. It's when we just don't even allow him to work. We don't even give him the credence, the credit for who he is. But 1 Corinthians 10:13, who has that? Go ahead, Tanya.
There hath no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that ye are able, but will with temptation also make a way to escape, that ye may be able to bear it.
But with the temptation, he'll make a way for us to escape so that we can bear it. Every single temptation, and the fire's out, and I've dodged another dart. But we have to allow God to do that work, and I have to put the shield up and say, okay, God, I cannot get through this temptation without you, but I know you can. I know you can get me through it. That verse says so, and he will. And sometimes it's just one step at a time. It's just, okay, the here and now, God, get me through it right now, and he will. That shield is up. So those are, just a few examples of fiery darts that the enemy aims at us to keep us from victory. But victory is ours. Read the end of the book. Victory is ours. But you have to put your shield of faith in place, thinking about and understanding who God is, and that he gives us his word full of promises and he's right there to just, the fire's out, and we dodge a bullet. All right, I'm going to say goodbye to our online friends. Thanks for joining us.